Phase 4 of Season of Discovery is actually one of the best phases, maybe as good as Phase 1. This is one of the most fun times that you could ever have playing World of Warcraft Classic. So why hasn't everybody come back to playing it? What are the issues keeping people from being able to enjoy what Blizzard has actually poured their heart and soul into? Because we can see that obviously people are coming back and more raiders are playing every single week. But it's nothing like the numbers from launch, which is inevitable. No game will ever be as big as it was from launch, at least like early on, and from Phase 2. Phase 3 was a very long one. It drained a lot of people and a lot of people quit towards the end. So what could SoD do to bring people back? And on the point of games always improving, it's the perfect time to check out today's video sponsor, Guild Wars 2, which has just released their brand new expansion, the Janthier Wilds. Guild Wars 2 is a free to start MMORPG, and the new expansion, the Janthier Wilds, just launched on August 20th. This expansion unlocks player housing and a new weapon type for every profession, the spear. And of course, there's new challenging and cooperative content that's released, single player adventures, as well as convergences, which are 50 player events. And if you've never tried the game, it's not too late to start, because the new expansions unlock new content, not a new level cap, which is so incredibly fun and refreshing. So click the link in the description to download the game today, or use the link to just download the game for free and try it out for yourself. One of the biggest draws to Phase 4 is that every single class is actually fun to play, and every single class is actually viable. All of the classes do a lot of damage. They all have some sort of cleave. You can tank with anything, you could heal with anything, and now you actually have more buttons to press. Instead, in normal classic vanilla, generally only warriors can press any buttons. That's literally how the game works. And as expected, of course, warrior is already now the #1 DPS class in the entire game. But other classes are actually competing, especially with overall damage. Cleave damage is huge in this raid. Feral druids have a fun rotation. Rogues are by far the most fun they've ever been in classic to raid on, so it's really a good time to get back. But one of the major core issues is that it's not easy to get back into the game. It's not a game that's very friendly for you to have catch-up mechanics. Even though you can level very quickly because there is a 150% XP boost, getting your runes themselves can be a slog. This can take forever for people because the backwards compatibility of grabbing your runes from the old phases isn't really a thing in the game. Then on top of that, of course, you know we need fire resistance for the higher heat levels of the raid, which does mean you either need gear from the raid itself or you'll need reputation. And reputation farms also take forever. So if you want to play multiple characters, or if you want to join in and play a new character, it's not really something that's easy to do. It's going to take you quite a bit of time. It always has, and that's a very classic World of Warcraft thing. But recently, retail just introduced something where you can actually transfer currencies or share reputation through all of your characters. Now, of course, retail looks kind of crazy. It's a hectic thing, but it's so nice for you to be able to play multiple characters, and the community has loved this so far. You're able to actually play one character and work on the other ones. Alts are a thing, and this was one of the core values that was introduced when Season of Discovery was first talked about. Of course, they mentioned specifically at level 25, they want you to be able to try everything you want, so you know at level 60 what you want to play. But Blizzard keeps changing the classes, buffing classes, nerfing classes. Consistently, you don't know if your class will actually be good or terrible in the next phase. So this is actually contradictory towards selecting one class to play, moving on to level 60. Because on a random Thursday, you might hear that your class is no longer viable in the raid. And people have a tendency to kind of gatekeep in classic World of Warcraft, where they won't invite multiple rogues, for example, in earlier phases during something like Nomer. Even a rogue in general, it was almost impossible to get into a raid unless it was a GDKP, which had already been banned at that point, so it was really hard to even find a pug. So what you did was try to raid on an alt. But again, alt catch-up mechanics kind of aren't really in the game. And I briefly mentioned pugs, which is another thing that's really hard to deal with right now. This is going to be a controversial opinion, but it's actually really hard to find any sort of raids going on, usually as a pug, if you're not in a guild. So if your class gets nerfed or anything, or you want to try out an alt and your guild only does one run a week, then you don't really have very good options because there aren't GDKPs. And the controversial opinion there is just that, of course, it does encourage gold buying, but it gives people a way to play the game more often. If not, something will always be hard rezzed. Literally every single pug. I don't think you'll ever find a pug where things aren't hard res for the leader. Totally fine to do that. It's just also you always end up in pugs that aren't nearly as good as you would see in other groups. Now, don't crucify me over the GDKP situation. I don't really care, and that's not one of the major reasons that people aren't playing, but it is a major reason why some people aren't playing multiple characters. But the inability to re-roll and play alts extends further than just playing a different class. It always goes towards the faction as well, and I've made a video covering the differences in the factions right now, but if there was an easy way to switch between, because there's never been a larger rift between how good it is to play Horde versus playing Alliance. Just as a reference, as I show you, obviously that Warrior is at #1 in the entire world on the whole raid. If I were to go between the factions and just show you Warrior itself, you can see that it's over 600 DPS higher than the world's #1 Alliance run. And an even bigger difference would be looking at fights where Horde are doing 400 more DPS than the best Alliance in the world, where the Alliance had 100% crit. Literal god RNG did not miss a crit on anything, but still is not able to keep up with Horde on certain fights. Now that is a skewed fight because that's Magmadar, and trolls do get extra damage to beasts, but everyone who wants to parse in this game, which parsing is always kind of a meme, but if you want to see a pretty good parse and you're playing Alliance right now, and especially if you're playing a rogue or hunter or any physical DPS class, you're automatically losing 200 to 400 or 500 DPS just by picking the wrong faction years ago. And those weren't things just by having the racials, which you obviously knew were going to be different, but it's the adjustments, the tuning, the changes that come into Season of Discovery. So it would make a lot of sense to make it easier for people to actually re-roll or play alts so they can enjoy all of the things this game has to offer. Because gameplay wise, Phase 4 and level 60 content is some of the most fun content that Blizzard has ever put out for WoW Classic. Especially again, because every single class plays so different than it did originally and has so many more buttons to press. And of course, you still get 100 to 0'd in PvP by a rogue that just kills you in the stunlock or a hunter nuking you from Narnia, but the imbalance in PvP was always a thing in classic World of Warcraft. So this was all a long-winded way of saying that Season of Discovery Phase 4 is amazing. The devs have put in a ton of work and it is so fun, and now that they've got the classes working in a really solid way, they can build up with new raids and new content. Of course, there was new mechanics in Molten Core, but now they can actually deal with spending their time on really building things because the classes have their abilities now. But the major issue is that the barrier to entry to get back into Season of Discovery or to play another class or reroll or anything like that is so high that this feels bad for a seasonal realm. Putting in all of the time for your character to just get nerfed and not being able to play a second class because it's going to take you an entire week or 20 hours of playtime just to moderately catch up is really, really punishing. So that's all. Thanks for watching. Shout out to Guild Wars 2 for sponsoring this video. And if you want to see SoD speedruns, which are starting very, very soon, of course, make sure to check out the Twitch page. Also, I'll be playing Retail and some more Black Myth Wukong.